to create that hierarchy where white people literally stated, we're going to group all of these people in Africa together by their phenotype, and we think they're inferior, right? That's why race was created. And racism is the actual, like the working, the actual hands-on work of the reason they created race. Racism is the structure based on race, right? So when racism was first spoken about in 1902, the word in English was first used in 1902 by a man by the name of Richard Henry Pratt. He was talking about segregation, which again is about the people at the top of a hierarchy, not just disliking other people, but actually putting that into practice, actually putting that into work, actually creating a structure. That's what segregation was. So now, when people at Oxford, for example, every single head editor at Oxford, the last one got into office, got into his position in 2013. But there have been 10 head editors at Oxford. Every single one has been a white man. Right? So when you tell me that people who are the perpetrators are going to change the definition of something that has never historically or etymologically been that, I'm going to call bullshit. I am, because that's not what it has ever been. And the perpetrator should not get to determine, to change the definition of what something is.
Okay, I get that. Would you say that prejudice is a symptom of racism in itself? Like, it's not the way that racism is used to segregate, but it is a way to see that that inferiority in another culture, another race.
Prejudice, though, because when you look at it from a certain, when you look at it and you take out your personal opinion, and again, like Adorno has stated multiple times, like the root word, the definition of the word itself, ism, is a system as a whole. And if one part of the whole is not benefiting from the system, therefore they cannot be racist because they are not benefiting in any way. Economically, politically, there's...
I just don't think a whole nother system to be racist.
Wait, if I may add this, just like Smooth actually just made a very valid point. You would have to fundamentally create an entire different system in order for black people to be considered racist. So here's what I'll say. If you want to argue that black people can be racist, all you need, right, to substantiate this claim, right, is a time machine, okay? You go back to like the early to mid 1400s, you find a man in Spain by the name of Gomez de Herrera, right? And you smack absolute fire out of him. You take his book and you rewrite everything that he wrote in that book about the systems of race, right? And human classification based on skin color and phenotypical attribute. Should you do that, then, and only then, could we have a conversation of black people being able to perpetuate the systems of racism. These systems were literally designed with one specific intent. So I don't understand why we're sitting here pretending as though that intent has just now faded away. I feel like America is one of the few countries in the world that I've been to, at least, right, in which y'all completely are more than willing to do away with historical context for everything that makes y'all look bad. It will always be wild as hell to me, right? Because any historical information that makes America look dope as hell, America will propagandize that for the rest of her life. Anything that makes her look bad, either she'll completely ignore it or she'll lie about it. Which is, honestly, I'm not surprised because, I mean, the UK is your mother and she's just as trashy.
Wait, and just to give an example of what Refreshing just said, right? Just to give an example of that, how the United States will want to do away with anything that makes them look bad. Right now, and you can look this up yourself, Oklahoma House Bill 2988, right? This bill is proposing that when you're teaching children in school about slavery in the United States, they want to teach that no particular race was the oppressed and no particular race was the oppressor.
And that's a lie. We know that's a lie.
Exactly. Florida has literally changed their curriculum, their educational curriculum, to say that black people benefited from slavery because we learned some new skill sets, right? It's cultural genocide, right? I would say it's cultural. It's literally trying to erase a group's history and replace it with things that make y'all not look bad.
There's also the
And
fact
that includes the idea of saying racism. We can all do it to each other, as though there is as though someone saying that they're calling you napkin is the same as you throwing millions of black people into the sea and changing shark patterns.
Right.
Right. That's what you guys are equating it to when you say racism happens to everyone. Someone called you a napkin is the same as these people's children being sold off. That's what you're saying.
Let's not forget the fact that, like, in current American society, right, the issues of systemic oppression are still here and they are still prevalent. And I feel as though that white people are usually not aware of this. And once again, I'm starting to understand that when I have these conversations, I have to come from a place of empathy solely because you are being forced to look at this from a completely different perspective than what you have known your entire life.
And they don't understand that they've been forced to think that way. Real talk, bro.
Exactly. So I can understand where you're coming from when you're like, but no, this is how it's been. Why are you trying to make it a new thing? All we're trying to say, right, is maybe, just maybe, there's a premise and perspective of the fact that what you've been taught your entire life was a lie. And here's my thing. You shouldn't be that surprised solely because if you look at American history as it was taught to you, you start to realize that fundamentally there are some inaccuracies that just don't add up. Like, for example, when we were kids, we were taught the ideas when it comes to Thanksgiving, right? The idea that it was a dinner, right? Celebrating the pilgrims surviving a harsh winter with the help of the indigenous people. From the moment I heard that story, mind you, I'm an immigrant. I moved to the United States when I was 7.5 years old. From the moment I heard that story, I knew something didn't make sense. And the reason as to why something didn't make sense to me was a simple question of, if the indigenous people and the pilgrims got along so well, and the pilgrims went on to be, like, the founders of the nation as we would come to know it, and we can, like, see white people who exist today that can trace their lineage all the way back to those pilgrims, where are the indigenous people? And the moment you ask yourself questions like that, you start to realize, right, that there are fundamental inaccuracies in the versions of history that you have been taught since your childhood. The moment you are willing to accept that, that's the first step, right, that you need to take towards starting to be actively anti-Black.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's the same that we try to whitewash history in terms of, like, each specific state trying to make it more culturally appeasing to our new generation, trying to ignore the faults and faculties that have happened in the past, and those who don't understand the past are doomed to repeat it. We heard that so many times, and I do want to. I do have a point, and this is a personal opinion. There's no facts to back up what I have to say, but I personally do not think that racism needs a benefit in order to be to exist. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of that. But I do understand, and I see your guys' point of view.
Can I just say though that as a YT person myself, and being in that mindset, I can understand where you're coming from. But when you have these tough conversations and, you willingly came up here and wanted to jump into the conversation, which is completely fine and we welcome it. But at the same time, when you sit there and you want to say you understand, you will never understand a Black that if you are going to sit here and you're curious and you want to ask questions and, these people are being completely, they're holding their own as they should. And I'm surprised they aren't really chipping away at people as they should. It's just mind boggling that when you choose to come into a platform, on a platform such as TikTok, and you ask questions, that when people are telling you that the way the system doesn't benefit them, and they should be having the same rights, they should be able to have the same economic and political stance as any other person, that's looking at it from rose-colored glasses, when they are literally saying, hey, this is wrong. Hey, we're not being treated fairly. Hey, your history that you've taught me, or you've taught my fellow other Americans is completely wrong. So your mindset off of what you know, knowing that they don't teach accurate history, you don't really have a valid stance on that because you weren't taught it. So I guess I'm just going to summarize and say, how are you going to sit here and validate something when you just said yourself that you don't actually know it and you don't experience it?
With what you just said to me, you basically
Hold on, Moon's talking. Hold on, the host is talking.
Carlin, I'll be right back. Just one.
Okay, I got you, boo. Okay, go on, Quinn.
Quinn, before you respond, I just want you to, prior to responding, like literally just stop and think of what cognitive dissonance is, right? Because you agreed with the whole car.
Thank you. I may cut you off, but that's exactly what he's dealing with, cognitive dissonance.
You agreed with the car and cow analogy, right? You agreed that there has to be historical context, right? And then you still double back despite that and say you don't think that racism, you're still saying you think you can divorce the dislike from the actual actions and the oppression. How is that possible when you have stated you think that there needs to be historical context, and I've given you tons of historical context that show that there is a connection between those two? This is just literally, as a white person, and I'm not saying you're a bad person, I don't think that this is done intentionally, right? There is something called white fragility. And it's not just white, it's an actual term, not something I'm making up to be mean or anything. It's an actual term. And it is a discomfort and a defensiveness that white people get when talking about racism. Because they feel as though, they feel defensive because it's like you're saying that people that look like me can do this thing, but that it can't be done to me. That's not fair. Why can't it be done to me? So that's what you're feeling. That's idea. That's what's happening. Yeah, that's what's happening when you clearly logically see the historical context, but then still double back to say, no, it can happen. I think that, again, okay, think about it this way, right? You can have the same action, but depending on who it's happening to, there are different names for it. An example of that would be in the 1600s, right? They came up with misogyny. That's the etymology of the word misogyny, that it was created in the 1600s. And misogyny is specifically hatred, and prejudice towards women, right? And we know that the impact that had. In the 1800s, when they wanted a word for hatred and prejudice towards men, same action, but just a difference on who's on the receiving end, they could have said, hey, let's call it misogyny. Misogyny is happening to everyone. No, but they came up with misandry, right? Because although it's the same action, they made a distinction as to who's doing it and who's on the receiving end, and also not to water down the impact that misogyny had. Right? So just because people are saying racism is specifically people at the top of a hierarchy oppressing other groups, and just because we're saying that does not mean that there cannot be discrimination going in the other direction. It's just not called racism because racism is a particular thing. Mm-hmm. Racism is people that self-imposed at the top of a hierarchy oppressing other groups. And we see that currently happening. We see that when we look at that the DOJ, Berkeley, Yale, the American Psychological Association have stated that Black children are 3.6 times more likely to be suspended starting in preschool for the same behaviors as white children. We see that when we see that that when you look at the Veil of Darkness study that shows that Black people are 25% more likely to be stopped and searched, even when white people are more likely to have contraband on them. We see that when we see that the NIH is saying that Black people are less likely to get pain medication and to have their pain. We see the oppression happening in that direction, right? So these are things that are still going on. I'm giving sources for them. And so if you'd like to look them up, go ahead and do that. But there is historical context and facts that override your, I just don't like the way this sounds, right? So that's it.
She just spoke up shit.
Yeah.
She just cooked.
I did come in here with that, as you say, white fragility mindset. I was already defensive, but I tried to make sure that I was open enough to not come in heated and make sure that I understood everybody's point of view. It's very important that we understand each other's point of view in order to have this conversation. And I don't think a lot of people sit down on the other end to actually hear and try and comprehend and empathize with another's experience, because that's the most important part of being human.
The clock app really do be wilding sometimes. LOL. That's too funny.
Yeah, no, I had to. I changed the app real quick, and yep, everything just went to shit.
The only thing that I was going to add to Adorno's statement is that, like, from a general perspective, if y'all would like us to start using like terminology that can like be substantiated within like a dictionary or what's the word I'm looking for, or like a thesaurus setting in order to describe the statements of discussion, we can do that, right? Like, I can define the actions perpetuated by white people as specifically white racism, if that would make you feel better. But it still doesn't change the fact that like racism from a fundamental perspective, like if we look at it from what it's been, what it is and continues to be, it is a tool that has been utilized to disenfranchise Black people, indigenous people, and other peoples of color. And so the people who are saying that like the conversation of white racism isn't a thing, this is like, y'all can barely see it, but this is a screenshot from the Oxford English Dictionary, and they do define white racism as a term, right? There is a definition for it, which kind of like, it kind of relates directly to Adorno's statement of the dictionary being what's the word I was looking for? Prescriptive, not descriptive, right? It's just a simple conversation of educating yourself on these premises. It's not that hard. I promise you, I do understand that these like conversations can be a little bit daunting and a tad bit uncomfortable. I get that, but like even still,
I mean, I just think that, like, on the basis, like, sorry to cut you off, but I just think that from a white tea point of view, like, if we're not uncomfortable for once in our goddamn life, excuse my French, like, I can understand the way that, like, you know, Quinn's mindset and some of the people coming in, because, you know, that is the way that, like, we're not shown what our ancestors did and how it negatively affects society today. And the fact that people will sit there and try to they'll try to argue someone else's experience when like they've never ever will be in that position.
It's really wild.
Like, living in North Philly, like, it doesn't matter if I get called any name, someone looks at me crazy, that will never actually hold substance to my life. So, like, and I hate to say that, like, so, like, openly, but because it's, like, but it's just truth. Like, my name will not stop me from getting a job. My appearance will not stop me from getting an education. That mindset alone, that you're going to argue someone else's experience when you will never experience it. I don't know how you argue past that. And like, I get, you know, the use of words can be, you know, a little extra because, you know, our education system in America is shit alone. But just taking out the education aspect and speaking just socially, why are you fighting someone else's experience, bro? That just doesn't make any sense.
I got invited.
My thing is, it's not even experience that's being fought here. It's systemic evidence. Because I think, Caroline, I'm so sorry for interrupting you.
It's evidence at this point.
We have facts, we have evidence and historical context to corroborate our arguments, right? On top of that, we have our own anecdotal experiences, right? Because like me and Adorno, we both know each other. We're mutuals, right? We would never argue from a solely anecdotal perspective. We would never argue from a solely emotional perspective. Everything that we say can be substantiated by facts and evidence. People just choose to be willfully disingenuous, and that's sad.
Who was speaking?
I'm Bobby.
Hi, Bobby. Welcome in. Are you over 18?
I am. I'm 21.
Oh, dokie. And are you white tea or melanated?
I'm white tea.
Okay, go ahead. So
I'm coming in this conversation complete. I listened for a while, and I just like to ask some things or just listen to what I got to say. So I'm a tradesman. I've been welding for about 6 years now, since I was 16, and I'm from Ohio, and I worked with all races and stuff, and I understand what you guys are saying because it's 100% true about
There's definitely you definitely cannot get. Sometimes people get rejected for job offers and things like that, and I that's 100% fair. But to say that you cannot be racist because you guys have had a really bad history with with slavery and a bunch of stuff like that, which is just awful. You guys. That's very awful, but you guys can't say that you guys cannot be racist if you are discriminating someone on their color.
Prejudice.
That's not racist. That is prejudice.
Prejudice is in the word racism.
For racism, that it is a systemic thing and that it will economically, politically.
I get what you're saying, Carolyn. I've heard this. What I'm saying is prejudice is in the word racism. So what I'm saying is if we were to do the same thing as in white people were to treat black people in the same the same way, then it would be called racism, which that is just bullshit. If you're going to reverse it.
If you look at the, Adorna's not here to give her amazing little thing about the Oxford Dictionary, is that there is a use of terms and it's simplified compared to how it's used and compared to how it is actually affecting people. And I think that, again, if you look at isms, which you said you understand, so I don't understand how you can understand if you are not speaking about it correctly, that an ism is a social, it's a power construct. And if people not able to benefit from the social construct, therefore they can't. That's just defeats the whole definition of the word.
Why are you guys going over?
Can I ask a question? I'm so sorry, Bobby. I just want to know something, right? Yes. I want to know, based on how you view racism, would you define racism based on its sociological definition or its colloquial one? The sociological definition being the systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, political, and economic advancement of another, and then the colloquial definition being prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that has been marginalized. Which one would you say is your definition of racism?
I'd say both of them. I mean, what?
So you would say both of them?
Yeah.
Both of
your arguments are
that,
if you were treating someone differently based off of their race. Yeah. If you're treating someone differently off their race, I don't know if you guys are really into the news about just watching the news, but recently there was a kid in New York City. I understand. There was a kid in New York City. There's video proof of this and everything. There's a kid in New York City that was jumped by about 14 kids because he was white, and all of them were black.
Cite the name?
Wait, just listen to what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying.
Can you cite the name so he can look at it?
Because I live in New York.
I don't know his name, but I remember. I remember this being in the news. You guys can look it up. I don't remember his name, so I apologize about this, but this did happen. This kid got jumped in New York City by a bunch of these kids only because he was white. So what happens if a bunch of white kids jump a black person? Is that racist?
No, again, it's prejudice because it's not going to stop the white kid from getting justice. It's not going to stop the white kid in the future or his family for financial or economic or political gain.
Right. It's the system. Ism make up the system.
Injustice the black person. So again, I can understand your mindset.
It's the system that both races are under, my guy.
I would just like to clarify something because I did do a quick Google search, right, about this person in relation to New York. I can't find anything about New York personally, and this is coming from the perspective of someone who's lived in New York for going on 12 years now. I personally don't remember that taking place. But something that I would like to clarify, right, because I think Bobby is misunderstanding some perspective here, right? Bobby, I want to clarify something. We are not saying that black people cannot perpetuate violence against white people, right? That's not what we're saying. We are not saying that black people can't be prejudicial. We're not saying that black people can't be discriminatory. We are not saying that black people can't be bigoted. Actually, I would say that black people can't be prejudicial because based on the basis of the definition of prejudice, black people are incapable of being prejudicial to white people. But I would say that we're not saying that black people can't be discriminatory, and we're not saying that black people can't be bigoted. We're not saying that black people can't perpetuate harm and violence. We are just saying that the way that this system affects us is fundamentally different from the way that it affects you. And because of that system, right, our actions play out completely differently. For example, I am a black man, right? I live, like I said, as I stated, I've lived in New York City for the vast majority of my life since I moved here to the United States of America. In New York City, I have been a victim of hate crimes at the hands of cishet white men about 8 times. And in all of those 8 times, right, 7 out of the 8 times I called the police, right? And 6 out of those 7 times, the police ended up harming me instead of the people who were attacking me, right? And that's evidence that seems to be prevalent and consistent amongst the black experience with police officers, with black people being 2.9 times more likely to be unalived by police than their white counterpart, regardless of the interaction. So that means even when I'm being calm and respectful and nice to an officer, I'm still more likely to die in that interaction. But on top of that, right, in New York City, it's 4 times more likely, specifically. And you can cite mypoliceviolence.org for that statistic specifically. But on top of that situation, right, we see those levels of oppression in education. We see it in home ownership. We see it in trying to secure jobs. We see it in trying to secure financial loans. We see it in every single system that exists within the confines of the United States of America. And because of those systems existing the way that they do in relation to my blackness, right, we cannot fundamentally equate our 2 interactions as the same. It's the same way in our society when we talk about misogyny and misandry. We understand that misogyny will hold more systemic weight than misandry. We're not saying that one is more valid than the other. We're saying that because of the way society exists, one does more damage than the other, right?
Okay, I can agree. I can agree with that. I can agree with that. But what I'm trying to say is you guys are the whole conversation is about is, can black people be racist? And you guys are in denial if you guys say that black people cannot be racist. That's just that is.
But we've given you the tools, and you keep saying that.
No, you guys are not giving. You guys are saying stuff, but if it was vice versa, not like I understand. Like, okay,
you're going off of opinion, and we're giving you like multiple facts and multiple definitions of the words, and you're still not able to like fully accept. And I can get this is a very controversial topic, but again, like I live in North Philly.
I would like to hear this from Refreshing. Okay,
I'm so sorry, Carolyn. I understand what you're saying. I just want to pose this question to Bobby. Bobby, you said that Virginia is the state you call home, correct?
No, Ohio. That would be me.
Ohio. Oh, that's even better. Perfect. Ohio. Can I ask you a quick question? In Ohio, do you know of the sundown towns that exist in your state?
You said that again. I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Do you know of the sundown towns that exist in your state or existed in your state? Okay. No. Do you know what sundown towns are?
No.
Okay, over the duration of American history, there have been certain locations across the United States.
Never mind. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't.
I'm gonna repeat the definition for the people in the live who don't know. Right, over the duration of American history, there have been certain locations in the nation in which, if you were a black person driving through, stopping by, just happening to be in these locations, and you were there after the sun goes down, you would be unalive or mass violence would be perpetuated against you. And the United States government has not criminalized these locations, these cities, these towns, etc., 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 right? Over the duration of American history, these places shifted from being basic, loud, common knowledge to being hidden locations all across the nation to which if black people or other peoples of color were to stumble into, mass violence would be perpetuated against them, sometimes even death, right? These places still exist to this day. Ohio has a lot of them, and the United States government does absolutely nothing about it. Black people disappear in these locations on a yearly basis at such drastic amounts, and the United States government does nothing about it. And to add a little sprinkle on top, right, when black people, let's say about 50 to 60 years ago, right, when black people became aware of the fact that these places existed, right, they created something called, and for lack of a better word, the N-word guidebook. Right? And these were black people who would take trips across the nation, right? And figure out what locations were safe versus unsafe for black people to stay in, for black people to reside in. The United States government has essentially banned all copies of that book from production. even though the danger still exists. So here's my question for you, right? How can you say that you hear this, you're aware of this, you're knowledgeable of this, right? And then try and tell me that the experiences of white people and black people can be equated as the same?
That's not what I said.
Okay, but
Thank you.
Here's the last thing I'll say. If you cannot equate our experiences as the same, why would you use the same terminology to define them?
Oh my, that's not anything about what we're talking about. We're talking about, can black people be racist? Why do you keep you're dragging it?
Bob, I literally just
What you said, yes, that is a very valid point, and that is
Thank you so much.
That is absolutely awful. But what we are talking about is
are not the same. Why? You see, I made a very. And
if you're judging someone off of their race, you are racist. It is that simple. If I was to go, that's not prejudiced. Okay, then if I was to judge you off of your color, then that's racism.
Prejudice.
If you judge a black person off of their looks because we hold the power economically and politically, without racism.
Okay, hold on one second.
Ism makes up a system.
No, hold on one second.
Simple, bro. ISM makes
Hold
up
on,
a system.
Moon's gonna speak. The host is gonna speak.
Smooth, I'm gonna let you go, but
Wait,
you can request if you want to come back up. Okay.
Smooth.
With all due respect, I would just say that the initial point that we're making here, right, is I discriminate against you, right, because of your race. That would be defined fundamentally as discrimination. I'm withholding a premise or practice from you because you are a white person. That's discrimination by definition, right? Like I said, black people fundamentally cannot be prejudicial against white people solely because prejudice by definition requires a factual of irrationality, right? It means that the actions that you are perpetuating against the person are fundamentally irrational. And if black people were to have an aversion to white people within the confines of the United States of America, there's historical, statistical, and systemic evidence that would justify that aversion to white people. So fundamentally, it would not be irrational, and thus we couldn't define it as prejudicial. We could say it's harmful, and that's still factual. And I'm not. That's why I feel like there's a fundamental misunderstanding here, because I think that you're hearing me say what I'm saying, and I'm saying that white people cannot experience harm. I'm saying white people cannot experience violence at the hands of black people, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you yourself can admit that fundamentally our experiences are different, then why is it so hard for you to understand that if our experiences are different, then the terminology that it should be utilized to classify them should be different as well?
Okay. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Can I say something?
What is okay? Okay. If one, all right. What is 1 + 1? Let me ask you this. This is an actual question. What is 1 + 1?
2.
Okay, good. All right. So what you said is that discrimination is what you would be if a black person was to, discriminate a white person. That's what you're saying, correct?
I said discrimination would be me withholding a premise and practice from you because you are white. But please pay attention to the but that I gave you after that, right?
Yes.
But
okay.
It does not become racism without sociological power element.
Okay. So that's what discrimination is. If you were to discriminate against me from holding me through values. Okay. All right. And then you can't do prejudice because of the past, right? That's what you're saying.
No, that's not what I said. I said I can't do prejudice solely because from a fundamental definition of what prejudice is, prejudice requires irrationality. And technically, a black person's aversion to white people can be rationalized by statistics. Of course, we can discuss statistical outliers, but that tends not to be the case.
Okay. All right. And then my last question for you is, how are all cops bad?
Oh, simple. The institution of policing in the United States of America has always had the intent of harming black people, indigenous people, and other peoples of color. Whilst we can argue the arguments of there are good individuals and there are good cops and bad cops, the entire system in and of itself is corrupt. So I'm not necessarily saying that it is those officers' individual faults, the same way that I'm not saying that white people being racist is necessarily their fault. Those officers have been co-opted by an inherently racist system to perpetuate harm, violence, and unaliving against black people, indigenous people, and other peoples of color. It's not their fault because that's what that system was inherently designed to do. That's why all cops are racist.
Okay. I have a question to repression
hold on,
now.
Broken. We do have a couple people ahead of you.
Bobby, are you wanting to speak on any more topics, or are you?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I appreciate you talking to me. Refreshing.
So have a good day, Bobby.
I hope you have a lovely day.
I can't remember if
Dominic was here first.
Dominic.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Dominic, welcome in. How old are you, sir? What was that?
I said I'm 19, so.
Okay, and are you YT or are you melanated?
I'm melanated. I'm Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican.
Okay, you can go ahead and state your comments, questions, concerns, point of view.
So I think anyone could be racist. It's not just black people. Like literally anyone. Like depends. Like any gender or any race could be racist. And the whole all cops are bad. I feel like not all the cops are bad because there are good cops out there. I feel like just a lot. Like some of them. Are like perceived bad, especially because of what happened with like 2020, like George Floyd and all the other shenanigans, all the other stuff like that. Cops perceived bad. I feel like not all cops are bad, but that's just my opinion.
Well, if you
I mean,
Carolyn, might I post an analogy?
go ahead, you're spitting.
If you, let's say, I got it, okay? You open your door, right?
Yeah.
There are 4,000 snakes outside your apartment, right? And I tell you, well, at least 300 of them aren't poisoned, right? 300 out of the 4,000 snakes aren't poisoned. Are you just going to go walking through that pit of snakes? Are you going to step back into your house, come up with a plan before you decide to step outside?
Come up with a plan before I step back outside.
Okay. Why would you come up with a plan before you step back outside?
Because I'm not trying to die with the snakes.
Exactly. I'm going to pose a second analogy that's slightly similar before I shift it to the conversation that we're initially talking about here, because I want to make sure that you're viewing this from a very specific scope, right? If you were to be, let's say we're walking through an apple orchard. I don't know why we'd be walking in an apple orchard together, but we're walking, right? We see this tree, right? And the sign says, right, this tree was poisoned before it grew, right? So some of the fruit might be poisonous, some might not be, right? Would you go pick fruit off that tree if you didn't know which ones were poison versus which ones were?
No.
Right, because that would put you in danger, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, think about the interactions between black people and policing, or actually think about the interactions of the system of policing just within the context of that, right?
Okay, well, I just want to say, like,
we could talk about some officers being good and some officers being bad, and I will never deny that. I have family members who are literally in policing, right? I will never deny that. But the overarching system is corrupt and harmful with an intent to hurt a specific group of people. As long as that overarching system exists, all who exist underneath it will be co-opted to perpetuate harm and violence in some way, shape, or form. Which is why we say a cab is the best cab.
Okay. Well, okay, so I have something that happened actually. So my dad got pulled over.
Can you speak up just a little closer to the microphone so we can hear you? And can everyone else mute? That's not
my phone. I'm using my headphones, that's why.
No, you're fine.
So my dad got pulled over by the cop, and the cop was like racist because his ex-girlfriend was
broken. Can you mute for me?
So his ex
Can you mute
his ex-girlfriend was white, and a cop.
Thank you.
Okay, his ex-girlfriend was white and the cop what?
Yeah, his ex-girlfriend was white, and the cop just kept asking the girlfriend if she was okay, and all that. So like, obviously the cop was racist because he thought my dad, for whatever reason, was kidnapped and doing something bad to the girl, whatever. There was another point in time where.
Wait, can we pause for a second, please? I'm so sorry, because I would like to right there. I would like to challenge like your line of thinking, right, with posing different vocabulary to justify the innate statements that are perpetuated here. That situation can be devised as one of two things, right? It can be devised as discrimination, which would be actions that are perpetuated against your father, specifically because he is a person of color, right? And which would direct us back to a conversation of the overarching systems of white supremacy that exist in the systems of policing. Even POC police officers in that system can be co-opted to perpetuate harm, because when they're being educated, they are taught the exact same harmful rhetoric that white officers are, which is why consistently when we see actions of white police officers perpetuating violence against POCs, right, there will be POC officers standing right next to them doing nothing.
Yeah, it wasn't a white officer. It was, from what my dad said, it was a Hispanic officer that went to high school with him, and I believe it was a black officer as well. So I feel like when you say
racism, that's agency over white supremacy by definition, right? Those two people chose to be agents of white supremacy due to their indoctrination by the systems of education within policing. That is the problem here, right? Does that make sense? Or do I need to elaborate any further?
I mean, it's also kind of hard to speak on. I understand, it's your family, but it's also hard to talk about someone else's experience when you weren't able to actually be there and experience it yourself. Because if you really think about what we've been talking about, Refreshing just gave multiple different points of view that I didn't even think about, but I immediately was like, what if these other officers were to act accordingly? Would they be at fault? Would they get demoted? Would they get fired because they didn't handle the situation the way that they were trained to?
And that exactly is why we say that there's no such thing as a good cop, because a good cop would have gotten fired, right? We understand that specifically within the systems of policing, right? Police officers protect each other. So that means when an officer perpetuates harm or violence against another officer, they all close ranks. They don't say anything, which is why consistently Black people, Indigenous people, and other peoples of color do not receive justice. We can talk about the conversation of missing and murdered Indigenous women in the United States of America and how many of them go missing at the hands of police officers. But the moment that information is brought to them saying, hey, these group of people went missing under your care, where are they? They close ranks and they say nothing, which leads to more people being further systemically disenfranchised. Women of color are victims to this violence at a drastic scale on a yearly basis. And we say, as a society, we say and do nothing. And police officers, like I said, they close ranks. When it comes to the conversation of internal affairs, usually internal affairs are stocked with people who used to be police officers who will once again close ranks and protect the officer. And then that officer, if they are found to be guilty, usually they won't face any criminal time or any jail time, and they'll just be transferred to a different precinct to work somewhere else. The first police in the United States of America were literally created to catch slaves.
That was going to be my next point.
Right? I feel like we shouldn't be surprised that the entire system from its inception was corrupt. Right? And I want to make this very clear. I know that there are some people who have family members who are cops. I have family members who are in the system of policing as well. And the reason as to why they're there is because they want to make a change. They want to make a difference. They want to do the right thing. And I honestly, I can respect them, right? But I cannot respect the institution that they work for, right?
Well, wouldn't that mean that the institution would need to get fixed then? What doesn't that mean the institution needs to get fixed?
That's why we're speaking up, and that's why we're trying to give people the knowledge. But if people aren't wanting to adhere to the facts, to the evidence, to the statistics. Right. And if people are going to continue to look the other way and not speak up when they see something and not try to act,
they're part of the problem.
Then that is a part of the problem, because we've been saying there's not very many white people that really come up here that have the same ideology that I have specifically. But if we are not having these healthy conversations and people are just getting defensive, because I can understand that this is an uncomfortable conversation to be in, but if you're not going to adhere to the facts, to the statistics, then again, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because someone is trying to say, hey, this is wrong, here's the proof, and you're going, but this situation, but I went through this, but my dad goes through this. It's kind of like everyone can be hurt.
Also,
but
if I may,
in our system, who's getting hurt more?
Right.
Who is the system not benefiting? If this is a free country, we have freedom of speech. We have all these beautiful, amazing rights that our military fights for. Why are people still being oppressed? Why are people still feeling like they're left out? Why are people still feeling, hey, this system isn't benefiting me? And how are we fighting that when people are going, hey, this isn't benefiting me?
So also, I just want to let you know, Dominic, I'm pro dismantling the system of policing. I don't want to fix it. I don't think that this system can be fixed. Like I said, if we were to go back to that analogy of the poison tree, right, you wouldn't know that there was a tree in your orchard that was poisoned and then let it continue to still grow. You chop it down, you replace the soil around it, and you plant something new. From a fundamental perspective, the system of policing over the duration of its history has been designed to harm, target, and unalive Black people, Indigenous people, and other peoples of color, which is why I believe that the system of policing should be dismantled and replaced with something else. And before anybody asks, yes, I have written out actual papers and plans on what we would replace the system of policing with.
Oh, I want to know. I want to read that.
We can.
You said what, Dominique? I said
we could talk about that after Dominic is done, because I don't want to take up time if he has something that he would like to say.
Do you have a rebuttal or?
So you don't think that the system can be fixed? You just think. I feel like the system could be fixed, because anyone could be, like we said, anyone could be racist. Anyone could be like
didn't say that.
You didn't say that.
I said anybody can be discriminatory. Anybody can be an agent of white supremacy, but we understand that racism requires a very specific system of power, which Black people, Indigenous people, and other peoples of color do not have the ability to enact. I would also like to clarify, because a few people, and this is in relation to Dominic's statement as well, a few people have been asking the conversation of oh, you want us to become a lawless society? I did not say, right, that we should just get rid of police and put nothing in its place. I literally told you that we have direct plans, right, to replace that system with something better. And obviously it wouldn't just be a conversation of today there are police officers, tomorrow there aren't. In my plan, it's quite literally, it's a give or take 52-step plan that takes about 12 years to implement, right? It's something that is gradual, but over the duration of time, right? What we do is we essentially substitute out the system of policing that currently exists with a better system of, well, not necessarily policing, but for lack of a better word, policing. For lack of a better word, right? We would be substituting it with a system that we can see would be proven to work. Is what I'm saying.
Dominique, did you have any rebuttals to, your question that was asked in the points that were given?
I just feel.
What?
I don't know. I just feel like this conversation kind of went south. Like it was like a whole different topic we were talking about. What I'm trying to, Black people can't be racist. Anyone could be racist, like I said. And then I don't think all cops are bad. I feel like they just need more training, more fundamentals and everything like that. Because, like I said, not all cops are bad, but there are some of them that are bad.
So I will say that, I understand, you're respectfully right to your own personal opinion. But, you came in and you stated that already. And we had given you, proof and sources. You had talked about your father's specific situation. I'm just kind of not understanding how did you want to learn more? Did you have any questions on the specific definitions? Because we gave you the.
I'm also a bit confused, right? Because, how would you, in relation to, I feel like I was decently clear about the statements that I made, but maybe I wasn't. In relation to the statement of, wanting police to receive more training, right? Would this be the same training that, pumps them and indoctrinates them full of prejudicial intent, right? Like, the whole point of the argument of all cops are bad is that it's not the individual, it's the system. And I explained to you why the system was inherently harmful, only for you to go back to the argument of individuals. I don't understand this American concept of individualism. It's always going to be weird to me, but I digress. From a logical perspective, we can look at how the overarching system perpetuates harm, violence, erasure, destruction, etc. We can look at how the overarching system consistently fails Black people, Indigenous people, and other peoples of color, right? We can look at the system of policing as it relates to arrest statistics and then correlate those arrest statistics with exoneration statistics, and we see that officers keep consistently arresting Black people, and yet Black people are being exonerated for crimes at a drastically higher rate than any other racial group in the United States of America, with Black people making up 50% of total exonerations in America, according to the United States exoneration database. So I don't understand why you would be in support of a system that has been proven not to work, right? And I want to make this very clear. I'm not diminishing the work that individual officers do. I have nothing but respect for the girls, right? What I'm saying is there is an overarching system of oppression that exists within the confines of the system of policing, and that is what pushes officers to do harm. You are weaponized by that system to harm Black people, Indigenous people, and other peoples of color.
I'm going to try to, before you...
I feel like you guys aren't...
Can I try to give you like a hit two birds with one stone? I don't mean to interrupt you, and I definitely want to hear your feedback. I currently live in North Philly. I don't know if you know anything about Kensington, but I'm just going to kind of try to hit two birds with one stone here. If I were to walk down Kensington, which I have many times, there in let's say a situation, not only is my existence alone scary for other people, but if I were to have an altercation with someone in Kensington, the cops immediately are going to treat me and this other person in the situation completely different. And then if we were to role switch and say that there was a Black man in the suburbs, again, if I were to have a situation there, again, the cops would also have that same situation that happened in a different location just because of the differences of skin. And that, again, that is not, that's not invalidating if I, hypothetically was the person in wrong or if they were the person in wrong. But we have facts that prove that cops do not treat people the exact same. And that can go based off of location. That can go based off of the same exact situation with different people. But if we have statistics to show